Hey guys, what's up? My name is Lucas. I'm a third year Global Studies student at UCSB. I remember coming into school, I didn't find a lot of videos that talked about the things that I wanted to know about student life here, specifically with academics and different majors. I didn't find a lot of content, so I figured 3 years in, I will just unload my brain of some things that I've learned, and hopefully it's helpful to someone out there. So first I'll talk a bit about my life here in general, and then go into the global studies major, which is what I'm majoring in. So in terms of my experience at UCSB, overall, super positive. Don't really have a lot of bad things to say. I came in during the COVID years, so I never lived in the dorms. I came right into an apartment in IV. It honestly wasn't that hard to just jump into an apartment. There's a housing crisis right now, so do expect difficulty finding housing. But if you do get housing, with your friends, obviously the location is awesome. I didn't live with people I knew my first year. I sort of met someone on Instagram and then had like a mutual friend, but it worked out really well. I still live with them today. And so that part's been good. In terms of social life, I'm not in a frat, so I've found it really easy to socialize, to go to parties and not be in Greek life. I think something like 8% of UCSB students are in Greek life, so it's really not that big. And the other thing is, if you want to go to parties, you're like, UCSB, I want to go to a party on the beach. There are tons of opportunities to go to parties. A big thing is band shows. There's just different local bands that will play on the weekends. They're super awesome. Band shows are like my most fun weekends. If you really want the party life, you're thinking Greek life is for you. I have some friends who are in frats and they really enjoy it. It just wasn't for me. I haven't had any difficulty socializing, partying, doing the things I want outside of Greek life. So that's my perspective on it. What else? I can't talk enough about the location. You literally live on the beach. You already know that. Let's see, what else? I was intimidated coming to UCSB just because a lot of the content out there, somehow it was intimidating for me. I was like intimidated to come to this school. I was like, everyone seems super social and like, I just don't know if I'm ready for this. It seems like a lot of parties. But I found it's such a big school, and like you're gonna find your niche. There's gonna be people who are interested in whatever you're interested in. I think that's true of almost any college, almost any big school. I've done a lot of random things here. I'm on the ballroom dance team. Never thought I would be. I've just had the opportunity to try a bunch of different things. So if you're intimidated to come to this school, I totally get it, and you will totally find your people. I just wanted to jump in and say I review my experience at UCSB so positively, partially as a result of luck or circumstance. So I have a lot of friends who are, for example, in different majors and have a lot of trouble with getting advising appointments or getting help with their major, things like mental health. Like I just mentioned, there is a housing crisis, which basically means Isla Vista is too small to fit all the students, and there's not enough dorm space, which is part of the reason you're not required to live on campus as a first year, is the university just can't house everyone. I don't know, I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that I've been really lucky in my experience at UCSB, and that hasn't been the case for everyone. But I can't really speak to the downsides that much because I've just had a really positive experience here. So just wanted to jump in and say that. Okay, now I'm gonna get into a bit about my major, which is global studies. There's not a ton of information about what global studies is. Coming into UCSB, I knew that I was interested in something like global topics. At the time, there was some trade war with China, and I was like, okay, this seems cool. I'm just gonna major in this. I didn't really know what it was. So if you're coming in as a global studies major, here's some things you should know. If you're not a global studies major, here's why you should be. So the first thing is the content of global studies. So what is global studies? Global studies is basically looking at the processes that have made our world more interconnected. So our world, we come up with these things called nation states, which are just centralized powers within a certain geographic region. So the US is a nation state, Mexico, countries basically. And it's looking at processes between countries. So things like trade, migration, just flows of capital. Capital is just like money, basically, investment, manufacturing capacity, things like that. And so some of the implications of this are that things across the world from each other can impact each other. So something that happens in China has a really big impact here. We saw that with supply chains over COVID, right? So something that's happening a few countries away, some issue, will have a really big impact on millions of people, millions of miles away. Not millions of miles, but really over long distances. And then we just are trading more. There are more goods moving across lines. It has implications for things like the environment. It's really, industrialization is really carbon intensive. And then the other obvious thing is the spread of capitalism. Globalization has been accompanied by the ideology of capitalism. So some things you'll get into are, what the heck is capitalism? What does it mean as an economic system, as a social system? How is it connected to the inequalities that we see today? Why so many people's needs are not met across the world? Why there are millions of people in Southeast Asia, for example, working in factories for 12 to 14 hours a day, getting paid, $1,000 a month. So questions like that are things that will be talked about in the classroom. There's a lot of different angles to come to study this from. So you'll have experience in economics, you'll take classes on culture, you'll take classes in history, you'll take classes on different ideologies and revolutions throughout time. So things, it's global. You can come at it from so many angles. So it's super interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary. You can take classes from a lot of different subjects and so on. So that's pretty much the basic content. It's obviously really important for reasons that are more or less self-explanatory. It's just looking at, so there's one other thing I wanted to say, which is something that I've taken away from global studies, is that it's a way to understand the specific agents and institutions that have created situations of drastic inequality. So the fact that wealth inequality charts look the way they do is not a coincidence, it's not inevitable, it's the result of specific processes that have happened over time. And so something that global studies does and will teach you to do is identify specific actors. So whether that's a president, whether it's a country, whether it's the police force or the military or a social movement, whether it's a bank, some international governance, or a non-governmental organization, there's a lot of different things that are going on that are creating situations that we see today, whether those are positive or negative. So instead of looking at something and either being depressed or being like, capitalism, or you will really have a firm understanding of how historical processes have developed to give us things like, rising sea levels. We all know that we are polluting too much, but why? Why can't we stop? What are the obstacles that are making people so reluctant to new policies like carbon taxes or things, I'm not going to get too much into it, but those are the types of things that global studies looks at. The second thing is the faculty. So I've had extremely positive experiences with the faculty at UCSB. My professors have all been extremely knowledgeable and extremely accessible, which is really important to me. I have a lot of questions that are not always covered in the course material, And I have found professors to be very willing to engage with those questions. If you want to know something that's not covered in class, or if you're confused about some concepts that your professor's talking about and you're like, what the heck does that mean? I've never heard of this thing. I've found the professors to always be just good at explaining things in terms that are understandable. I've never felt like I'm intruding in office hours. It's always been very welcoming, and I like the way the classrooms are run. There's no electronics in the classroom. Some people, it weirds them out. Some people like to take notes on their laptop. I always take notes by hand. I kind of think it's a cool policy that's just sort of like, hey, we're all gonna sit in this classroom for like an hour and learn about something, and if you show up to class, you might as well learn something and not be watching Netflix or whatever. So that's I don't know, a small thing that some people get freaked out about. Oh yeah, so the last point I wanted to make is that I personally have not found global studies classes to be very challenging. Part of that probably has to do with my skill set. So the main things you'll do in classes are reading and writing. Those are the skills you'll develop. You're gonna get really good at reading stuff, and you're gonna get really good at writing essays. But I have not found it difficult to get an A in or a B in most of my global studies classes. The thing that's interesting for me is it has felt like there are a lot of resources available to students who want to learn more. So I'm a third year. I found it very easy to get on board with different research projects. So at college, you will probably, if you're a global studies major, you might at some point be interested in doing research on a topic. Personally, it has not been very difficult for me to get to find opportunities to do research and to pursue things that are interesting to me outside of class. But it does take a bit of self-motivation, because if you just do the things that you're doing in class, that's super chill. That's what I did for 2.5 years until just last quarter. I really started doing more things outside of class to learn more and pursue things that were interesting to me. But just as a preparation thing, there are so many resources that are available to you that are not necessarily advertised in class. So you can definitely go through 4 years and complete all the requirements, and you'll do fine, and that'll be great. But if there's something that really interests you, I would expect to be doing a good amount of work outside of the things that are listed on the major sheet. Which brings me to another point, which is that there's not that many units that you have to complete for the global studies major. As far as majors go at UCSB, the unit requirement is pretty damn low. So I would really recommend a minor. I'm minoring in philosophy. I think it's really cool to minor in another social science. So like sociology, anthropology. Obviously hard skills are also a really great complement to global studies. Something like statistics. I know the statistics minor it's like data analysis something at UCSB I've heard is pretty challenging. But yeah, taking global studies in combination with a minor I think is a really good idea. Double majoring was not for me. I've found that I can get more out of classes when I'm taking fewer of them. I think if I just did the major, it maybe wouldn't have filled up my schedule how I like. I like to have things to do and feel like I'm working a lot. So anyways, the minor was the perfect thing for me, and I would really recommend that. But my main point with this is that there are a lot of different directions you can go with global studies. It's a super, it can be applied in many ways. So that means you will be thinking about how you want to add to your major, whether that means adding a minor, whether that means thinking about research projects or getting involved in other organizations, in other classes, in other disciplines, to really make it the education you want. And the big pro of that is, again, a lot of it is what you want to learn. There's so much flexibility in the classes you can take. So if you are a curious person, you will have so much success in global studies. So much of this major is being able to ask good questions, just being really curious, reading a lot, and from that you get more questions. So yeah, the final thing I will say is the support from advisors is really good. So Megan Zero, she has a YouTube video on global studies, a little intro thing. I didn't watch the whole thing, but the advisor for global studies is really excellent. She knows a lot about global studies. Global studies has a YouTube channel for a lot of common issues that people run into in global studies. So I would say the advising and the support is really strong in global studies. I think if you're struggling, if you're having questions, there will be someone available for you. I know that's not the case in all departments at UCSB, but I'm really grateful that for global studies that has been the case for me. I guess the final thing I'll note is that I'm going to Argentina next year to study abroad for my full senior year. So I will be graduating in Argentina. So, and I feel very lucky because my time there will really complement my major. And I think it's a really cool thing that study abroad can be such an integrated experience into what you learn. So I know for a lot of my other friends who are maybe in the engineering department or biology, the scope of places you can go is really limited by your major. And you need to find universities that have these specific classes that they offer, and it sort of feels like the thing you're studying is at odds with going abroad or being in another country, or it somehow is an obstacle, which is completely the opposite in global studies. Being in another country will completely change how I understand my education. It'll be a huge boost in observing the things I'm learning, getting firsthand experience, hopefully doing field work and research in Argentina. So I haven't even studied abroad yet, and I already highly recommend it if you're a global studies major. Okay, that's it for now. I hope that this was helpful. I know global studies is kind of this broad thing that is really confusing if you don't really know what you're getting into. But yeah, hopefully someone found this video helpful. All right, have a good day.